With the markets now intensively debating exactly how far the Federal Reserve should and in fact might go ahead and cut interest rates, I thought it might be a good idea to take a step back and to ask an even deeper question, which is, why does the Federal Reserve need to cut rates at all? And the answer to that question is remarkably difficult, in part because this time, in this particular tightening cycle, the Federal Reserve raised rates 9 times, and they managed to get rates to only 2 3/8%, which is not very high. When you look at the previous 5 Fed tightening cycles, back at the end of the 1970s, they got rates up to 20%. At the end of the 1980s, they got rates up to 9 3/4%. In the year 2000, they managed to get rates up to 6.5%. And at the end of the 2004 to 2006 tightening cycle, they managed to get rates to 5.25%. So why is it this time, after they hiked rates to only 2 3/8%, we already have an inverted yield curve and markets that are screaming for interest rate cuts? Well, there are really 2 answers to that. One is a 9-letter word and the other is a 4-letter word. The 9-letter word is inflation. Inflation came down a great deal over the course of the 1980s and early 1990s. So certainly that explains a portion of why the Federal Reserve is unable to hike rates as high today as they used to be able to do in the past. But inflation rates have been actually pretty stable at around 2% now for a quarter of a century. So at best, that's a partial explanation. Now, there's another explanation which I think fits the data even better, which is a 4-letter word: debt. Debt levels have absolutely soared in the United States across government, household, and corporate debt, from about 125% of GDP back at the end of the 1970s to the double of that, 250% of GDP today. And essentially, what's happened is that the economy can no longer support that level of debt without extremely low interest rates. And that may have played a role in capping the Fed's rates at 2 3/8%. But this raises an even deeper question, which is, why have debt levels soared in the first place? Well, the answer seems to lie in the gap between wages and productivity. Since the early 1980s, productivity has soared while wages have not grown anywhere near as quickly. As a result, most of the gains from the increased productivity have accrued to people who are very wealthy, the top earners and the top wealth holders in the country. As a result of that, in order to consume the value of their production, people have to borrow money. For example, if people are producing twice as much as they used to, but they're earning the same amount, the only way that they can consume that excess production is by borrowing money on credit cards, mortgages, auto loans, or having the money in a sense borrowed indirectly on their behalf by governments or corporations to keep the consumption going. So if the Federal Reserve is ever going to achieve its dream in the dot plot of getting rates to 3% or above, it seems like wages are going to have to grow more quickly than productivity. And until that happens, it's going to be very hard for the Federal Reserve to sustainably increase interest rates beyond their current levels.